Now we would like to move on to the plenary session 1. Development and practices of high-integrity carbon markets to achieve net zero in 2050. First, I would like to invite Mr. Dirk Forrester, the CEO of IETA, International Emissions Trading Association, to give a keynote speech titled Current State of the International Carbon Market and Practices by the Private Sector. Mr. Forrester, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be with you today to talk a little bit about what's happening in international carbon markets. I'm going to do this in 3 segments, and I think what we're searching for in international carbon markets is some of the same synergy that was discussed in the prior plenary, and that synergy cuts across sort of how countries are setting up systems, how voluntary markets are emerging, and ultimately how the international arena in Article 6 negotiations is shaping up to drive greater action by corporates. This is just a snapshot of logos of IETA members, so you'll know who is speaking to you. The International Emissions Trading Association is a group of businesses that are committed to the Paris Climate Agreement and to using market-based instruments for achieving net zero goals. You should see a few Japanese logos up there, but actually IETA is a very global organization of close to 350 member companies and growing. And really, we've grown a lot in the last several years because of the strengthening of compliance markets, which is what I'm going to talk about first. When we talk about compliance markets, we talk about that universe of national programs. Some of them are subnational programs that are set up in law, that are typically aimed at achieving either a share or a large part of Paris Agreement goals for the jurisdictions involved in them. This is a chart produced by one of our member companies, Clear Blue Markets, that took a look at the sort of trajectories of growth in both compliance and voluntary markets. Right now, about 23% of global emissions are covered by carbon pricing compliance systems, but there's an effort championed by the government of Canada to push that number to 60% coverage by 2030. Right now, we have about 25,000 companies that are covered by compliance system, so you would expect that to grow as more jurisdictions, more emitters, and as the price per ton increases, it becomes more serious for corporates. This is a World Bank view. Every year they produce state and trends of carbon pricing, and this is from just the month before last, from May. And you can see there's a slight expansion in the coverage of compliance markets around the world. The important jurisdictions that are covered in Europe, parts of North America, and China really cover the dominant share of emissions. But I think what's really important in this to get a vision of what's happening in compliance markets are those that are sort of colored in the light purple. So Brazil, India, Indonesia, well, I think Indonesia is already blue, actually, but Turkey, some jurisdictions that are setting up new compliance markets as a way of meeting their new NDCs. And they're building these systems kind of in concert with the efforts to strengthen NDCs. So carbon pricing programs really are integral for many of these countries in achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. By market segment, I guess I wanted to give a sense of how much growth there has been in these markets. Some of it driven by climate targets, but also a lot of it driven by changes in international energy systems. But just since 2020, we saw a massive increase in the pricing of systems and the expansion. And you see the dominant one there in orange is the European emissions trading system, with the UK system and North American systems kind of making up the rest of it. These numbers are, again, because the price per ton has grown substantially in these jurisdictions as natural gas became more valuable. In addition, we saw a lot of press attention on voluntary carbon markets, which I wanted to put in context. And this is thanks to work by Shell and Boston Consulting Group that kind of puts in context that all of the media attention on the voluntary carbon market may be a little bit misplaced. Why is that? Because it represents about 2% of the value of international carbon markets right now. The real value is in the compliance systems. And I wanted to stress that at the outset because for us at IETA, we do care about integrity in the voluntary carbon market, but we also see it as a real pathway to compliance markets that are really needed, where you can stimulate much more stable investment. And ultimately, that's our goal, is to see more compliance systems. So let's drill in briefly to the voluntary carbon market. I think one of the reasons that many of us see it as important is that it does provide a mechanism for corporates that aren't covered by national compliance systems to do their fair share in the fight against climate change and to reach beyond their value chain in support of science-aligned pathways to net zero. They can also channel finance to places where it's desperately needed. Frankly, a lot of the mitigation potential that's available on a global basis that's cost-effective is in the developing world. Those countries could try to put forward really ambitious NDCs, and I hope that they do. But for many of them, they're resource constrained. They don't have the funding, they don't have the technological capability, and sometimes don't have the know-how for achieving all of that. They need international partnerships. So there's a real ability for voluntary markets to help channel some of that investment to unlock that mitigation potential. And finally, that helps to pave the way for the compliance systems that for us are sort of the holy grail. This is a chart, again, depicting that very fact that where does the money come from in the international carbon market at present? Well, largely it comes from North America and Europe, with only 4.4% of it coming from the rest of the world. If you look at where it's going to, however, it's going throughout the world, but only about 6% of it is going to North America and Europe. The rest of it is going into the developing world. So voluntary markets do have this potential of channeling revenue from richer jurisdictions and richer companies into places that have that mitigation potential, but don't have the means of achieving it. I think it's really good news that we're starting to see more and more corporates embrace net zero targets, and the trend line is good for seeing more of those, many of them responding to the Science-Based Target Initiative or parallel initiatives. However, a lot of those companies aren't on track for meeting those science-based targets because they don't have enough mitigation potential that's affordable on system. And they really need the international cooperation potential to allow them to deliver more and to actually achieve those goals. So I want to talk just briefly about what's happening in voluntary carbon markets, because they have kind of declined over the past year. And I think part of that is because they're waiting for clearer rules from some of the international initiatives that we'll talk about on the panel in a few minutes. But in the early part of this year, we saw about almost 90 million tons issued in the first quarter of this year, most of those being of vintages more recent than 2019. I think this is demonstrating a trend of interest in fresher vintages, less interest in old vintages, but also that number of how many are being issued isn't quite as strong as what we'd like to see. If you look at the retirement side of it, so those that are actually reporting the use of those credits, it's only 55 million in that quarter. And again, that's the early part of this year, right? And there will be more retirements with each month that goes by. And oftentimes in voluntary markets, the retirements are out of sync with the issuances, and they come more toward the end of the year. But it does show that there's a bit of a lag in market activity and similarly kind of a softening of prices in recent years, particularly for nature restoration projects. I mentioned that part of that is because companies are very much focused on the work of the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market and the Voluntary Carbon Market Initiative, as well as SBTI and the International Standards Organization, all of whom are doing work and coming up with crisper definitions about what it means to take on a net zero target, what does it mean to be Paris aligned, and that's sort of in the case of ISO. But also on the supply side of the market, the Integrity Council's work in setting a threshold standard for all of the independent crediting standards used in the voluntary market to consider and to aspire to raise their quality standards to meet to meet the CCP label designation. That's something the market's kind of waiting on. And we're really delighted to see that the ICVCM has sort of clarified exactly which of the existing methodologies are going and existing programs will be eligible to use that label. But we expect to see a lot more of that as the year moves on. Similarly, the VCMI, and I'm not going to talk deeply on these because other panelists will talk who are involved directly with them. But I want to put into frame that the VCMI has done really important work for helping corporates understand how best to set their targets and how to communicate what claims they are making in use of voluntary credits, so that it's clear that those credits are being used in a context of aggressive decarbonization and the company's own emissions, but also to go beyond that, to do even more through international cooperation. IETA itself also issued guidelines for high integrity use of carbon markets, which I recommend for you to see because it tried to weave together all of the elements on this page of what we've learned from ICVCM, VCMI, and SBTI, and therefore what would we recommend as responsible corporate action in advancing net zero goals. So I want to bring this all together about why does it really matter at the end of the day. And I want to talk just briefly, since at least some of you are in the research community, about Article 6 economic modeling that we at IETA have been involved in with the University of Maryland, and in part with kind support from IGES and from several governments that have enabled us to take one of the models that's used frequently in the IPCC modeling. It was developed by one of the U.S. National Energy Laboratories, and it's been used in every IPCC report up until now, and I think will be used in the future. I'm familiar with it because when I was in government in the Clinton era, we used this model to understand the dynamics of the Kyoto Protocol. And now it's been turned to helping understand what happens in the world of Article 6. And the fundamentals of it are that we can all get to our goals faster and cheaper by working together across international borders than if we work in silos. And I hope that brings back some of the themes from the opening presentation today, the opening keynote. It has the potential for achieving $250 billion a year in savings by 2030 and could mobilize $1 trillion in investment by 2050. And the reason this is important is if that cost savings inspires countries to take on tougher targets, which I think it can, then we could achieve an additional 5 gigatons of CO2 savings per year by 2030. And the reason for it is kind of embedded in that little graphic at the center. That graphic at the center shows all of the indices grouped by region and sort of what a price trajectory is. And if you can see that deep red line, the deep red line that's kind of 2/3 of the way down the page, that's what the price would be if everybody cooperated. But if they don't cooperate, you have this spaghetti chart of prices that are all over the place. It doesn't really inspire one to take on tougher action if it's just going to cost you that amount on the higher end. The important thing about the red line versus the spaghetti chart of lines is that they both achieve the same environmental performance. It just does so at a lower cost. This is why we are convinced in the business community that Article 6 is the key to actually delivering on the net zero aims of the Paris Agreement. In this report, which I recommend for your reading, it shows who some of the large buyers would be in this world and the large sellers. And you can kind of see them there on the chart. The buy side is under the line, the sell side above, but the role and degree of the benefits kind of can depend on what groupings or clubs might form within this. We've also learned that if some of the large players decide not to participate, it hurts on the sell side, but on the buy side, if some of the big buyers don't materialize, it really just makes it cheaper for everyone else. So in the world of Article 6, there's a lot still on our plate as we approach the COP in Azerbaijan later this year. It does provide this international framework for cooperation and actually is the one part of the Paris Agreement that can unlock the most private sector potential. And it's kind of got two pieces of it that are both not moving forward as fast as we would like to see. Article 6.2 is the world of kind of bilateral or multilateral cooperation, where you can cooperate directly with partners in the bilateral sphere. Or in 6.4, there is an international crediting mechanism that is also hopefully going to be available for countries and companies to rely upon once the rules get further clarified. We're a little bit concerned about the negotiations that some of this should have been done by now, particularly around registry infrastructure and on the sort of some of the, I'm not going to go into this in detail, but into some of the detailed methodology decisions that need to be taken around removals, which are going to be critically important going forward. But I think the important thing is that for the business community, when we gather at the COPs to talk about what's important happening that day, is usually the Article 6 room that gains the most attention. It is that because of that critical role it plays in the underlying economics of the system and whether or not the Paris Agreement is going to succeed or fail. It's also important because up until now, as we've seen NDCs come forward, we at IETA try to analyze what's in those NDCs about Article 6, and 80% of them show an interest in use of Article 6 for achieving additional ambitions. And already about 20% of the countries are actively engaged in at least one cooperative approach. We try to follow the bilateral agreements that are being developed. And this is difficult to read, but on the left-hand side, it shows the agreements that are in place with potential developing country partners from countries like Singapore, Sweden, Norway, Switzerland, and Saudi Arabia. On the right-hand side, that's all of Japan's, which are almost as big as everybody else combined because of the great work that's gone on in Japan in establishing bilateral relationships with your partners. We're continuing to follow this, but our hope is that if we get more clarity out of the Article 6 negotiations, it actually simplifies the ability to achieve those type of partnerships. We also track the letters of authorization, which sounds like a very, we're not going to do this forever, by the way, but these are the agreements coming from countries that are potential suppliers to the international markets that are providing models for how they authorize the credits to be exported from their country ultimately. And this is an area that we hope gets standardized so that it can unleash the true potential of Article 6. That's probably getting a little bit granular for this audience, but at the end of the day, all of this is about making net zero possible. I think many in the private sector view the cooperative approaches within Article 6 as being the policy bones that can deliver net zero. They really are the net of net zero. Thank you very much for having me today, and I hope this provides some food for thought on where we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forrester. Next, we would like to move on to the panel discussion. First, let me introduce the panelists. Elchin Aliver-DF, Head of Mitigation Team and Senior Negotiator, COP29 Presidency, Republic of Azerbaijan. Chris Shipley, Head of Global Carbon Markets, Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, UK. Petipar Rakitikan, Director of Carbon Credit Certification Office, Thailand Greenhouse Gas Management Organization. Masaki Yamazaki, Senior Corporate Managing Director, Head of Corporate Administration, Head of Sustainability and Responsibility, Nomura Research Institute. Lydia Sheldrick, Director of Policy and Partnership, Voluntary Carbon Market Initiative, VCMI. Anton Tsvetov, Associate Director for Policy Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. Mr. Tsvetov is appearing online. Also, the CEO of IETA, Mr. Dirk Forrester, who has just given us a keynote presentation. And last but not least, Kazuhisa Kawakutsu, Director of the Paris Agreement Article 6 Implementation Partnership Center, IGIS. I would like to hand over to Mr. Kawakutsu of IGIS for facilitation. Over to you, Mr. Kawakutsu.
Thank you, Kanagi-san.
Nice to meet you, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to today's ISAP. This is a plenary #1, development practices of high integrity carbon markets to achieve net zero in 2050. And also thank you, Dirk, for your excellent keynote speech, which kind of covers where we are in terms of Article 6 voluntary market and also high integrity sites. Particularly, I just wanted to, first of all, introduce myself. My name is Kazuhisa Kawakutsu. I'm a director of Article 6 Implementation Partnership Center. I joined this Article 6 Partner Center since last year. Before this, I also engaged in the Article 6 negotiation for last 7 years or so. Very much kind of getting into the Article 6 negotiation. But at the same time, from last year, as was also mentioned by our Vice Minister and also opening remarks, the implementation of the Paris Agreement is really essential to really achieve net zero. We still have a lot of gaps in our path to net zero, and this international cooperation is really the key to enhance our NDC to really achieve net zero. So currently it's not enough. And we really make our international cooperation to happen to fill that gap. So for this, we set up this Article Implementation Center, and we are also supporting high integrity carbon market. Again, this was also our key goal in this A6IP Center, which we call it A6IP Center. And also today we have a very distinguished panel from government as well as the private sector and also the initiative that they are also pursuing high integrity carbon market. So I like to, without further ado, I like to start posing some of the questions. And particularly for this session, I would like to go into more in the practice, how we can make this high integrity carbon market on the practice. So we have principle established last year in the G7. Also, we have Article 6. At least the rules are being agreed. Of course, we are still discussing the negotiation, but we have already rules and principle, and that's something that has to make it net zero through our international cooperation. So the question is how we really wanted to can make this in practice and put into the actual action. And especially in this context, private sector will play a very important key role to bring more projects, engagement, and then make this more emission reductions and make this society to net zero. So for this first, I'd like to start asking Elchen from COP29 presidency, and also the Chris from UK government, and also Putipa-san, whom also following Article 6 negotiation quite closely. But same time, she's also engaging the Thai government, greenhouse gas organization, supporting both domestic as well as international carbon market. So I'd like to pose 3 questions, and then maybe the panels can also respond to those. First, what are the key outcomes you are expecting from the COP29? Again, COP29 is a key milestone towards this year. And how does high integrity carbon market contribute to that? And the second question is, what policy and some agreement, such as discussed in G7 principle last year, and also discussed in the UNFCCC, including Article 6 negotiation, or establishing and maintaining high integrity carbon market. There is a relevance in the domestic policy as well as international negotiation. And the last point is how the government can support, implement those policies to ensure the effectiveness of this high integrity carbon market. So with this, I'd like to ask Elchin-san for your intervention.
Thank you, Kazu. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank you for IGS inviting us to address on behalf of COP29 presidency here in very pertinent issue on Article 6 and carbon integrity market. Just today, a couple of minutes ago, our keynote speaker, Mr. Dirk Forrester, already provided a good overview of overall pictures of carbon integrity market and as well as Article 6 negotiation process. We are approaching to almost to the 10th anniversary of Paris Agreement, and it's really disappointing that we are still discussing how to fully operationalize its Article 6, which is really very promising for climate actions and as well as for achieving the ambitions of all countries and also supporting the sustainable development of those that will need it. Article 6 promises several positive climate-friendly perspective for our planet. First and foremost, Azerbaijani presidency set out the vision which has the 2 pillars, enhancing ambition and enable action, with clear, ambitious national plans and the means of implementation without leaving no one behind. Higher ambitious plans actually is the requirement of Paris Agreement and is also recognized by a global stocktake last year. And it's where it says that we are not in the track of addressing climate change by 2050, and we need to have an ambitious plans to keep 1.5 degrees within reach. And for that, we need to present ambitious national determined contributions for the next year, next cycle of NDCs. And to implement those ambitious NDCs, we need a means of implementation for every party. That includes primarily finance, that's true. And the NCQG new collective quantified goals is the paramount issue for COP29, that's true. And we are trying to agree new NCQG by at the end of the COP29. But at the same time, along with the NCQG, there is also another avenue that can promise the means or the new just means for the implementation. That's also Article 6. Article 6 has the potential to incentivize the developing countries to make the climate green friendly the initiatives, bolster mitigation, support adaptation, and finally help those who wants to implement ambitious NDCs, particularly in the sectors that hard to abate, to use the advantages of this market. So therefore, we have the choice by the end of this year to finally end the technical discussions on Article 6 and bring it to the political level, and then agree on at least maybe not the perfect final outcome, but the outcome that will be acceptable by all parties and will contribute to our climate actions in general. Azerbaijani presidency already prioritized this issue, and we are holding by the end of this week HOD, head of delegations level meeting with major negotiating groups in Azerbaijan, which also include of its program the Article 6 to be discussed there. And we believe that the strong push by the political level representatives will have an impact on technical discussions on Article 6. And we will hold other avenues by the COP29, and we will try to facilitate the process and achieving the finalization of Article 6 by COP.
Thank you very much, and looking forward to finalization of the Article 6 for the high integrity market. So next, Chris, please.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Director Kazu, for the introduction. I'm Chris Shipley, Head of Global Carbon Markets at the UK Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. In the UK, we had an election this month, and we now have a new party in power. We haven't yet briefed them on carbon markets. We will do very soon. But because the new government hasn't taken public position yet, I'm a little bit limited in what I can say. But nonetheless, I think evidence certainly suggests that carbon markets could play a very important role in achieving our temperature and sustainable development goals more cost effectively, as was shown by Dirk's initial presentation. However, in order to get there, we're going to have to overcome some of the issues that are slowing down demand and keeping us from realizing markets' potential. So on the supply side, there's been some criticism that credits don't represent the emissions reductions or removals that they claim to. On the demand side, there has been some criticism that organizations are buying cheap credits instead of reducing their own emissions. And then sometimes the marketplace in between those two sides can be difficult for countries and actors to access. There can be challenges in getting good data because there's a lot of opacity there. And so thinking to the theme today of taking an integrated approach, I think a really good way to try to resolve some of these issues is by countries coming together and clarifying what good practice looks like. And so a good example, I think, is the G7 principles of high integrity carbon markets, which Director Kazu mentioned at the start. These were agreed in April 2023 and set out some important principles to guide market actors on the supply side, demand side, and on the marketplace side. So they include, for instance, that credits should be generated in alignment with Article 6 rules, and that care should be taken to make sure that environmental and social impacts are managed, that buyers report transparently on the credits that they buy and how they are using them towards their decarbonisation strategies, and that marketplaces are transparent and that information is widely available. And I think taken together, that sends quite a strong signal to the market because the G7 represent a large buyer group, potentially a seller group with very active carbon market environments within those countries. And those principles, I think, are broadly useful then if you're, for instance, a country that's setting your strategy for selling into Article 6, if you're an independent integrity initiative and you're formulating complementary principles, and they can be a useful input. And there have been countries as well that have acknowledged the G7 principles when they've set their own principles and regulation at home. It also helps, I think, to bring about a little bit more standardization in the market. So voluntary carbon market can be quite fragmented, and principles like these are a good way, I think, to send a clear signal to all actors. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. And I think it is true that there is a certain criticism for utilizing this carbon market. But at the same time, we need to hear their voices and also need to address this. And so I think clearly data, information, transparently shared, I think that's very important. And also the alignment of Article 6. I think that is also very important. And as was also mentioned by Doug, I think a compliance market is Article 6. And something also be quite relevant to that respect. So, but I just keep it some time for Putipa-san for your response.
Thank you very much, Kokasu-san. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As mentioned, there are some key principles and requirements that mentioned in Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. For our government and organization, we think that these principles and requirements are very important and crucial for maintaining and ensuring high integrity carbon market. So we integrated these principles and requirements into our development of national crediting mechanism. And it's important in our participation in international carbon market, cooperation with partner country. I would like to share information with all of you on our national crediting standard, because we think that these requirements and principles are very important and crucial. So last year, 2022, we developed our premium tier to enhance our standard and to align with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. For premium tier, a project developer has to submit modality of communication to show their intention to develop the project and demonstrate the additionality. And in addition, the project developer, they have to organize stakeholder consultation, and they have to submit the Sustainable Development and Safeguard Assessment Report. And for forestry project, they have to prepare non-permanent risk report. And also for project type which are susceptible to the risk of non-permanent, the project must apply the rules and procedure concerning buffer credit, which shall be withheld from issue carbon credit. And in premium tier leakage from the project is considered in tier methodology. For the baseline, the conservative and below BAU baseline will be applied. And after the registration of the project, TGO in collaboration with the Environmental and Pollution Control Office will monitor the project every year to ensure the standard and the reliability of the project. In addition, the project developer have to prepare and submit Sustainable Development and Safeguard report and also non-permanent risk report during verification. Moreover, TGO also promote international recognition of premium tier and its assurance of high integrity standard, including through participating in the technical assessment of CORSIA eligible emission unit, in which premium tier is currently approved as conditionally eligible, and we are working closely to address the remaining issue. At the same time, we are also considering engaging in other international rating schemes, including ICVCM that Anton will be mentioned next. Through these processes, we can build confidence and trust for both domestic and also international stakeholders using premium tier in enhancing their climate actions and delivering on their climate goal. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Putipa-san. And also importance of this national domestic crediting mechanism, which Thailand has been also implementing. And this is also the area where there are certain linkages with NDC and also carbon market and integrity. As mentioned also, again, like China, also implementing ETS, and Brazil also developing their own ETS, and in India also developing their also own market. So there is also growing trend of having the domestic carbon market, which is also related to the high integrity carbon market as well. So maybe this is something we could also take into consideration. So next, again, I'd like to also move on to the private sector view, which is we have a three distinguished panel. And I'd like to also ask each of them, what are the best practices and initiatives that the private sector can adopt to ensure high integrity carbon markets? And what are the primary interests and concerns of the private sector regarding high integrity carbon markets? And how those concerns or challenges can be addressed for having the more broader participation? And what are the key challenges and lessons learned in implementing your respective initiatives? So I'd like to first start from Yamazaki-san. So the 民間企業が質の高い
野村総合研究所の山崎と申します。
So I'm Yamazaki of Nomura Research Institute. We are engaged in consulting and IT solution. And through that, we are supporting the company's business. And carbon neutral consulting is also done by our company as well. I am responsible for sustainability with NRI, and I'm here. With regard to the first point, as the private sector company, rather than giving priority to credit, we should be making our own efforts. Such activities are very important. At any rate, in order to develop carbon market, it will take time. So during that time, we would like to utilize credit, and as a whole, we would like to push ahead with the efforts for carbon neutrality, which I think is important. With regard to greenwash, on this point, VCMI standards should be well understood, and we understand them and utilize them, even when we cannot be 100% compliant. The thinking can be used as a framework. In that way, the demand side quality will be enhanced. As for credit procurement, there are intermediary entities from which we can get, and the companies can get some information. So project methodologies, validity, as well as considerations for addition need to be considered. Without them, the low credit can be procured as well. As I see in VCMI, those international standards are going to play a greater role going forward, I would say. And the concerns and challenges, with regard to that, the voluntary standards internationally, and each country's systems are going in parallel right now. In Japan, GX ETS, the emissions trading execution has been done, but international voluntary standards are sometimes adopted by a company. Then there are some gaps between international and domestic. They need to cope with both of them in order to invite a greater number of entities, and then it should be better to have a more common standards domestically and international. And there are companies that are taking a challenge for international standards. I would like to support them, and the lessons learned should be studied internally and then disclose the activities externally as well. Challenges and lessons learned. On this one, carbon neutrality is the goal, and each company, I think, has the same goal for that. In each country, each company has its own character, personality, and business characteristics are different, and therefore, the approach and story-based approach that fits their company character would be very important. In terms of lessons learned, greenwash. If you are afraid of greenwash, and then you refrain from disclosing information. So in order to avoid that, standards and frameworks should be better utilized so that the high transparency-based disclosure of information should be encouraged so that it can be duly appreciated going forward. So such activities are going to be important, I think.
I think it was very especially we have also different initiatives, different standards. I think some kind of a harmonization and coordination will be also very important as we have also different market is also taking place. But also I think transparency and information disclosure is something that's also key for the companies to really engaging in that respect. So thank you very much for sharing that. So also as mentioned by many, we have several initiatives particularly is around supply side, demand side. And I'd like to start with the VCMI, Lydia, for your response, and then I move on to the Anton. And so Lydia, please.
Thank you, Kazu, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm Lydia Sheldrake, Director of Policy and Partnerships at the Voluntary Carbon Markets Integrity Initiative. That's VCMI, and we're the standard setter for the demand side of voluntary carbon markets. So you can think of Anton and I as two sides of the same coin. Anton at ICVCM focusing on supply side, and we work hand in glove with them to deliver integrated end-to-end rules for the voluntary carbon market. Our mission at VCMI is to enable voluntary carbon markets which make a meaningful contribution to the Paris goals. So that means scaling them up so they can have a real impact and accelerating the transition to Article 6 and compliance markets. In order to do that, we need to build the integrity and infrastructure to enable voluntary carbon markets, which are currently small and quite niche, to scale and have real impact. And if we can do this, then we can mobilize 50 billion per year by 2030 of additional finance into climate, but also nature and sustainable development goals. So given that we work on the buy side, we talk a lot to companies, and there is a lot of pent-up demand. Key challenges that they face are, as Dirk mentioned, the targeted media scrutiny surrounding voluntary carbon markets. Voluntary carbon markets have been controversial, and one piece of that has been the lack of a standardized and recognized claim that companies can use when they make use of carbon credits. So that is exactly what we have been working to deliver, and we have delivered a claims code of practice which enables companies to use carbon credits above and beyond their science-aligned decarbonization and make a third-party verified claim. We delivered this through an 18-month multi-stakeholder process. And that was important because, as we've heard earlier, we really need an integrated approach to these international markets where civil society, private actors, and government actors all need to be involved to set out the rules for what good looks like. So through that, we have delivered a high integrity standard, which is recognized by government, civil society, and can be used at the operational level in practice by companies. It takes the principles and is aligned with principles such as the G7 principles that are set out by governments and puts them into a format which can be applied and then audited and verified by companies. And we've had the first companies coming forward with claims. Bain and Company and Natura earlier this year made their platinum level claims. So we're seeing this market transition into a high integrity market, which brings confidence to companies to engage and to communicate about it as well. We've also developed a beta version of a Scope 3 flexibility claim. As Dirk mentioned earlier as well, many companies are not on track with their science-based targets, and they need tools to help them make progress on the path to net zero. So through our Scope 3 claim, companies can use carbon credits in order to accelerate climate action and take responsibility for their emissions footprint on the transition. And we will be further consulting on that guidance as we finalize it towards the end of the year. So in terms of what next and a sort of integrated approach, what we can see now is more governments taking action, and the claims code and Scope 3 claim can provide a blueprint for governments to develop policy in a harmonized way, which is really what we need in order to scale climate action and build an interoperable international voluntary carbon market which delivers for people and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. And also, it's really great to see this. The integrity claims has been already taken place, and also some companies already tested. And this is really exactly, the addressing the concerns and also the expectation from the companies to use it. So looking forward to see this. And also, I kind of noticed acceleration transition to Article 6. So something that will be also key in terms of, kind of integrating those towards the compliance market. So that's also a very important point I can point it here. So Anton, thank you for waiting online. Hope you are well. But yeah, just back to you. And again, ICBCM is a really key part for the supply of the carbon credits. So, give to you for your floor.
Thank you very much, Kazu-san. And it's really a pleasure to be with you virtually. Unfortunately, I couldn't be with you personally, but thank you, Aegis, for making this possible for me as well. Now, really to explain briefly what our place is, the ICBCM's place is in this ecosystem, and what we are bringing to the table. I think it goes really to the, I'll start from your question on challenges, right? And many of the speakers before me have already touched upon this, that a key challenge has been in this market is essentially trust that is needed for us to unlock the demand and ultimately the finance going into mitigation and sustainable development. And what the ICBCM is doing is we are bringing a threshold of quality and integrity to the market, working from the supply side. So to put simply, we are defining what good means for carbon credits. So we operate in a way that a financial regulator would regulate a product that is traded in a given market. And in our case, the product is carbon credits. And again, Lydia emphasized this for a process. It's really important to have the market together and the stakeholders together. And similarly, we have gone through a process to come up with the core carbon principles, which are 10 principles identifying quality in the carbon market. And the G7 principles were mentioned today. They're very much aligned with the CCPs, the core carbon principles. But to operationalize those principles, we have also developed an assessment framework, which is an elaborate rule book that defines carbon credit quality and defines the requirements for integrity for carbon crediting programs. That is about more than 200 requirements, very specific, that pertain to either carbon crediting programs or to carbon crediting methodologies. And when we have a carbon crediting program that is CCP eligible, and when we have a carbon crediting methodology that is CCP eligible, then credits that were issued under that methodology by that program are CCP eligible. And we are now in the very weeds of this process. We have approved as eligible the first 5 programs. Those are the largest programs in the market. So we have worked with them on their governance side, and they have updated their rules and procedures to better align with ICBCM's requirements on the governance side. And we have also announced the first decisions on carbon crediting methodologies. We bundled them together and call them categories. And the first 2 categories were now approved. And we will be seeing more and more of these decisions on carbon crediting methodologies coming out. And this is how the CCP eligible credits that adhere to our threshold of quality will be arriving to the market. Now, the theory of change is that demand will start to collate and start to rally around those high integrity credits. Investment will flow. Companies and buyers will be able to comfortably and confidently identify high quality credits and be comfortable investing in them, and being sure that while they're following the mitigation hierarchy and adhering to VCMI's claims code of practice, they will have an end-to-end way of contributing to mitigation, contributing to sustainable development, and helping bring finance to the developing world where it is much needed. Additional finance that would not have happened in the absence of these projects, these initiatives, and these carbon crediting programs. I'll pick up one more point that was mentioned recently by other speakers, and specifically, I think Lydia touched upon this very eloquently as well, on the crucial role of governments and regulators in this process. We find governments being interested in the voluntary carbon markets and looking at how governments can use them to incentivize investment and to attract finance to developing countries as well. And we think that this is very important for the voluntary carbon market and for regulators to come together along with interested parties internationally and international organizations to see how this can work together to really, again, I will mention the integrated approach as well. I feel like I have to make sure that we deliver both on the NDCs, that we deliver on corporate mitigation objectives, that we deliver on sustainable development objectives, and that we deliver on broader social sustainability requirements that are there. And if we have the time, we'll pick up on the sustainable development element later as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Anton. I think really, to create a trust, we really need to also build some examples. And the core carbon principle, which you have also provided, has already started. So looking forward to see that actual examples, and also emphasizing the government roles to address this area. So something we would like to also, going forward. So last questions, also maybe recognizing time being left for us. But I also like to pose important questions around these synergies, which is also the topic of this the conference ISAP, and how to really addressing triple crisis. Particularly areas, we already have Article 6 has shall promote sustainable development. So really, a sustainable development in a broader architecture of Paris Agreement, really emphasizing on ensuring that. But at the same time, we see biodiversity is also the area where also talking about the crediting, as well as when we do the forestry projects, that's very much related, interfere with the biodiversity area, and also circular economies. We have also many waste management projects in climate change and market. So there are certain areas where we have a close relationship between these. So in this context, maybe in the last set of questions, and also if there is any reflections, including the waiting for toward the last for any reflections for anything that you wanted to add to the high integrity carbon markets. But I really wanted to ask about the synergy, how we can kind of create the synergies for this, and also any examples that you might also think. And yeah, I'd like to start with Ed. So please.
Thank you, Kazu. The first and foremost, Paris agreements, one of the ultimate goals is a sustainable development. And as you also mentioned, Article 6, there it several times mentions sustainable development. So whatever actions, climate actions we are taking, that has to serve to sustainable development. Aggressive emission cuts can't be implemented without taking into account national circumstances and sustainable development pathways of different countries. So we have to see these really important elements. So that there is a synergies between the sustainable development and carbon market, and the carbon market has the potential to support the sustainable development goals. So therefore, we have to focus on this element of carbon market. In the beginning of this month, I had a chance to join to Africa trip of co-president designate, and we saw communities in Africa that they not only don't have the green energy, but they also don't have even the access to energy itself. And when we support their transition, if there is any transition, we first have to think about how we can make them to start their energy access process, so that they do not copy the same mistakes that the rest of the world did. And that's the very important, that we support the green renewable energy projects in those territories that they are mostly vulnerable and they are mostly affected by climate change, and this carbon market has the potential to support them as well. But the carbon market also has the potential to support the demand side as well, because demand side needs to cut the emissions, but in some sectors it's really very difficult to do, and the carbon market offers potential for them to address these difficulties through using the credits that they can take advantage, and to also present some actionable solutions for climate change. Thank you. This concludes my remarks. I hope that I did not exceed the time.
Thank you very much. And that was strong words. Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks. Yeah, good question. And I think carbon markets already are supporting sustainable development goals, particularly, you mentioned Article 6 and language there, but also in the voluntary carbon market, where we've seen independent standards take steps to measure sustainable development outcomes, report on them, and verify them. Over the last 10 or 20 years, perhaps, Gold Standard is one example. There are other organizations doing similar work. And evidence suggests that buyers will pay a premium for carbon credits that come with those sustainable development co-benefits. And so that might be an interesting lesson, or offer some experience when it comes to biodiversity crediting and the question of how we can use carbon markets to solve the biodiversity crisis. I think what it will probably require is just a way to measure biodiversity. So how do you quantify it? How do you report on it? How do you verify that has taken place, and do that transparently? I don't know the answer to that, but I don't know very much about biodiversity crediting. So I'm looking forward to the discussion in the next plenary on that point.
Thank you. When we mentioned about the synergy between high integrity carbon market and also the sustainable development, I would like to share the information on the first pilot Article 6.2 project between Thailand and Switzerland. The Bangkok e-bus program also showcases how sustainable development co-benefits are taken into consideration for the government in designing to provide authorization. The project promotes deployment of e-buses in the Bangkok metropolitan area, which delivers strong environmental co-benefit in the reducing air pollution, especially PM 2.5, that right now is quite serious in our city. And while support from international carbon market also enable the project to be cost efficient and maintain the transportation fee to support local commuter in Thailand. This is one of the example of the project that show the synergy between carbon market and also the sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Patiba-san. So, Yamazaki-san, onegaishimasu.
Japanese companies working on biodiversity in addition to climate change, and so their awareness has been heightened. TNFD-lined information disclosure has been progressing as well, as I understand it. Simply credit utilization, not just for offsetting, but the value-added credit utilization is more widespread as well. Forest-related credit area has a landslide reduction contributing activities have been emerging too. In the case of Japan, the awareness on forestry is not sufficient in Japan. So still in some areas, there is a depopulation areas, industries have been fading away in certain areas. When it comes to forestry credit, even when it is a little bit costly, 70% of Japanese land mass can be utilized. We have expectation for that. In NRI, we are addressing the social issues such as this one. In Tsuruga City in Yamagata, the forestry-derived J credit generation as well as distribution is something we are working with the municipality and forestry associations. And each actor, each business entity is conducting its activities, so we are extending the procedural support to them. and precise information was shared with them by using blockchains, by ensuring the authenticity of such information. That is the area that we are currently working on. So municipalities and other entities should be able to use such support services. So such efforts, I would say, would be working as one axis of our credit evaluation going forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Yamada-san. And I move on to, Lydia.
Thank you. It's a great question. Carbon markets and voluntary carbon markets are inherently synergistic. It's a financial instrument which delivers finance to the ground, and where there is carbon, there are often people and nature. So they're really the tangible benefits which motivate the project on the ground by the proponents, and carbon is the financing instrument and the intangible benefit which can be monetized. So I think the key is really communication and education. We need to cut through the controversy in order to mobilize and scale demand. And that is going to take synergies and working together, cutting through silos, as we heard in the beginning, through all actors across private sector, civil society, standard setters, everyone on the panel today, in order to do that, scale demand and through education and communication, because we have all the pieces of the puzzle. It's just a case of putting them in place and aligning the message to flip the equation, where at the moment it's easier for companies to do nothing rather than do something and say something about it. And that's the real challenge that we need to fix. And that's primarily, I would say, a communications challenge. So maybe some good marketing we could throw in there as well. But I think it's really appropriate to be having this conversation here in Japan, where Japan has been a real leader, not just on carbon markets, but also in the interdisciplinary research and thinking, including through IGS and the Article 6 implementation partnership. So thank you very much for bringing us together for this important discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before going to Dirk, we have Anton, but increasingly we are getting several good keywords from the panel. So, but first I move to Anton, and then last to Dirk. So, Anton.
Thank you so much, Kazu. And I think that, you know, in the VCM has basically arrived to the understanding that it has to be synergistic with the Sustainable Development Agenda and with the other 17, the remaining 16 goals. I think it's not a question of whether to do it or not. It's only a question of how, all the way from safeguards and to a very specific, explicit, quantified SDG benefits. The way we deal with this at the ICVCM is there are sustainable development requirements for both at program level and at category level. For programs, and again, to echo what Chris has said, that programs generally require safeguards and benefits, sustainable benefits to be reflected, and it's only a matter of getting the right level of transparency, the right level of benefits sharing, the right level of reporting, and the robustness of the requirements themselves, the right references to the international rules that are made in specific sustainable development areas in other fora, maybe not necessarily climate related. So I would say that, and again, I think buyers would expect their credits to come with at least not creating negative trade-offs in other sustainable development areas, and I think we definitely are ready to pay a premium for credits coming with sustainable development benefits. So it's our job as people creating this infrastructure to help them report these benefits and safeguards in a comprehensible and trustable way. Thanks, and thank you for convening this again.
Yeah, thank you. So I like to ask also Dirk to kind of reflections of all of these discussions. But I also getting in terms of the synergies, like we definitely need to look at this value added part of it. But same time, and also maybe communication is a key. I think we have all the stakeholders needs to be involved. But same time, kind of framework to assess I think that assessment part is also something we need to look at in quantification of biodiversity or quantification of other elements. So, but I think those are very important keywords that I just wanted to mention. So, but with all that, Dirk, for your any reflections?
Yes, thanks, Kazu. And I think when I hear that word synergy and think about sort of how it applies to carbon markets, a lot of it does kind of get at the same point of leverage, right? Of leverage in investments that we're making to make sure we can accomplish the most with those investments possible, whether that means sort of working across borders or working across sectors or frankly, working across some of the objectives. We at IETA did a study with Imperial College in London a few years ago, where we looked at the then voluntary carbon market, which was a fraction of what it is today, at what the co-benefits were and how would you value them. And it turned out that the carbon component, which was just a few dollars per ton, paled in comparison to the water benefits on forestry projects, to the biodiversity benefits. And when they tried to quantify them, it made the carbon just look tiny. And all of those other benefits accrued to the host jurisdiction, right? In addition to the climate benefit, but it really put a spotlight on just how much leverage is possible through what sort of well-designed carbon markets. And I think you'll see with the evolution of the ICVCM and VCMI, companies will be looking more and more to how they can tap into that leverage and achieve more than one benefit for a given investment. That's usually when the engineers come in the room because they say, tell me all of the things you want to accomplish and we can help you achieve more through smart design. The other piece of it that I just wanted to highlight that I think Lydia and others sort of touched on is it's also important for there to sort of be the coherence in policymaking that I think in our vision at IETA, you would have a carbon credit that's produced in the voluntary market that is of such high quality that it's comfortable for regulators to accept that in compliance markets. We've seen that happen in international aviation with CORSIA, where CORSIA will recognize independent carbon crediting standards as well as sort of a UN crediting standard. That's the way the state of California decided to exert leverage in tapping into the expertise developed in voluntary carbon markets to use the same kind of crediting standards and that same organizations to produce credits that could be recognized there or could be sold in a voluntary carbon market. That's the way the government of Colombia is approaching it. The government of Singapore is approaching it, is to sort of look for a common pool of credits that are valid for compliance in either a voluntary system or a compliance system. And I think that comes back to some of the tools that we're working on, like we haven't talked about the Climate Action Data Trust that, again, IETA and IGES and Chris, the government of the UK have been involved in, that's trying to set a common data standard for registry systems so that they'll talk to each other and so that you can see all of the credits available in the market through one portal. So you can see everything in one place and be able to sort it by types. Again, it's the synergy that is potential between voluntary and compliance markets. And I think it'll carry over also to the regulatory frameworks that are set up, whether it's the financial services and trading regulations or ultimately the environmental compliance piece of it as well. Just in closing, I came here from China, where I attended a large government-sponsored carbon markets conference. And I was impressed to learn that that's exactly how they're thinking about it. The China CER of the future, which will be a defined set of new methodologies, they're hoping will be used in both compliance and voluntary markets, and the same kind of trading rules that apply on sort of integrity and trading would also be sort of cut across both compliance and voluntary. So maybe this is a theme, a good one for the Article 6 implementation partnership to consider going forward is helping on the host country side to establish kind of common and familiar systems that can truly unlock the potential. Anyway, and thanks to Aegis and to you, Kazu, for a stimulating session.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the great discussion and panels. And just I think first of all and foremost, I think COP29 will be the, maybe a few months ahead. So something we really need to have a success. And I heard Article 6 also one of them. But beyond that, I think NDC updates is also being now started. So many countries are also looking at beyond 2030 target. So that's also a very important point in terms of how to get to the net zero goal. But to do that, I think we need also private sector engagement and then actual projects happening. But for that, we need several standards and policies and voluntary market, compliance market. There needs to be also kind of harmonized. I think that's where our kind of challenges are. But at the same time, we see a little examples here. So as a way forward, of course, as an Articles Implementation Partnership, we really supporting Articles implementation for the host country government, also working with many governments as well, and also private sector to really realize this. And also there is a carbon market platform, which is a G7 supported conference on in this coming Rome. This year is Italy. So this is something we also bring our discussion forward. So that the G7 will also discuss and some outcome from this ISAP, and then also discuss in the next. So with that, I'd like to thank all the panelists. A great discussion. Apologies for a little bit extension of the time, but let me join the couple of applause for all the panelists. So thank you.